Welcome to another episode of Pressbox Chatter, everyone. We're pleased to be welcomed by PJ Stock, our second ever guest on the show. PJ is a former NHL player who played for the New York Rangers, the Boston Bruins, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Philadelphia Flyers. He was also part of the sport media industry, having worked on TSN 690 in Montreal, RDS, and Hockey Night in Canada. PJ, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
I want to know why I wasn't the first person on. Who beat me to this?
Hey,
Dan Robertson.
we were in contact with you for a while, I think.
Yeah, I know.
According to Sam.
I'm slow at this. I'm very slow at this. I got lockdown with 4 kids has been a disaster, and I was supposed to be a little earlier today too, but just a disaster. But it's all good now. Spring's back, where everyone's getting healthier. I'm happier, and I'm upset I wasn't the first person on. But let's go. Let's have a good one today.
That's okay. Well, if we have 1,000 people on, you'll still be in the top 2.
Yeah.
So just before we kind of get going here, I want to tell you a little bit about like the show that Ryan and I that we do. So it's called Pressbox Chatter, and it's a hockey podcast. We like to call it more of a show because it's 10 minutes and it's scripted. It's a pretty unique way that we deliver hockey, news from the last week. So we're 2 Ryerson sport media students, so we kind of know a little bit about how to produce a pretty good quality show. We think we like writing, we love hockey, and we like to laugh, usually at the other's expense. But so we combined all 3 of these and formed into the podcast that we have now. And we're starting to get a little bit of traction, gain a bit of traction, and yeah, that's kind of the breakdown of what this show is. So this is what we are. We like to do, this is the second time we've done a special kind of episode where we, veer off from our usual format and we try to interview somebody. So here we are today.
I like the hockey podcast, and behind you have football and baseball jerseys.
And basketball too.
And is that Simmons over there? And basketball.
Yeah. I got Tatum right behind me. Yeah, all the sports.
Yeah, that's good. It's well covered.
Yeah. Thank you. So, I mean, before we really get into all the questions, how are you doing? How's your pandemic life been? What's going on in your world?
Well, I live in St. Lazare, just outside the western tip of Montreal, and it's going. Knock on wood, where everyone's healthy, and being locked down with 4 kids for a long time. It was fun for a family that's normally on the go all the time. We had family dinners, we had, not family outings, but we did stuff in the house all the time, family games, board games, stuff that you would have never done. And after a few weeks, I was loving it. The kids weren't. So it's been about 11 and a half months of them hating their father because dad wants to keep doing stuff. But it's been, again, knock on wood, healthy family, a lot of healthy friends, and it's the weather's been great during this entire craziness. And again, there's you can look at the glass half full as many ways as you want to it, or you can look at it half empty. And I look at it as a glass that just has some water in it, which is for me the best way to look at things. So we've had a pretty good year.
That's good.
Well, that's good to hear. So we want to get into your hockey career, obviously, a little bit here, and just hear about all the fun stories, your fun experiences you've had, and your opinion on these questions. You signed with the Rangers in 1997, and we just want to know, what was it like, being an undrafted player in the NHL, and being an enforcer in that, and what was the challenge you had in either becoming an enforcer? Were you trying to be one, or was that something you just kind of fell into?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of the trajectory on how I ended up there, because it's not something that anyone really plans to be.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little bit of an offensive defenseman. Funny enough, if you look at my stats in the NHL, you couldn't really tell, but a little bit of an offensive defenseman in Quebec Major Junior Hockey League in Victoriaville. And at the same time, I love the contact aspect of the game. I love the open ice hitting part of the game. I was able to read the play. I wasn't really good, but I was able to at least read the play. So, you go back to when I played junior and I started in 97, so 95, 96, those times. Hockey was pretty simple. You'd have a power play breakout where the defenseman would stop behind the net and one defenseman and their top player would swing like this, almost, the two simple cones, and they'd go up the two wings, and the defenseman would step out and always make the pass to the best player. It was just every team had the same breakout, and I would read that play, and I'd skate a mile away and hit the guy, elbows up, knees, stick to anything. Different time, and back then, different time was they would respond with someone to come after me for making that hit. It was teams had tough guys; they had role players, and someone would come after me and go to beat me up. I got beat up a couple times, and then my coach decided to play a big 6'4" defenseman with me by the name of Matthew Raby. I love you, Matthew, for saving my life for so many games. So I didn't change my game. I actually got a little bit more confident because I knew that now I can get away with a little bit more stuff. So the offensive part of the game was still kind of there, but the physicality kind of picked up to another level, knowing that I had a layer of help. Well, the problem was we started playing teams that had two or three of these physical guys, and after one of them fought Matthew Raby, I was still on the ice, they would send that next guy after me. So after getting beat up a few more times, I started to get the hang of it a little bit, and I think a lot of that job is confidence. And I did well in one, did well in two, did well in three, and a lot of people would look at tapes of how to do breakouts and stuff. I actually look at some tapes of, I'm like, okay, this guy hit me, what went wrong, what went right. And I started learning a little bit about that part of the game, and it helped me. And like I said earlier before, I became confident in that role. So I could play the game one way, and then if I had to defend myself, I was getting better and better at defending myself. And then one game I fought one of the tough guys in the league, and I did very well against them. And that's the pinnacle of confidence when you can take on the Goliath, I guess, if you want to say it like that. And it went well. So the problem is with that is that I wasn't good enough as a hockey player to go to the next level, but I was good enough in that type of role to go to the next level. Despite my size, I was able to defend myself, and fighting again was used for different reasons back then. Intimidation, get the crowd going, get your team going, defend a player, lots of different things. And it was more of a role, and it just kind of something that people saw that I could do. I never thought the NHL would ever be a dream of mine or a moment that I'd ever have, but that funny enough route that I ended up using to survive to get me through junior ended up creating a role for me in the National Hockey League. And, like I said, I wasn't drafted because I wasn't really good enough or big enough or fast enough or good. The puck wasn't really my friend either, but I was able to develop into something. By the time I was 20, you're drafted around 17 or 18. By the time I was 20, that some NHL team said like, maybe we can use this guy that can't skate, shoot, or pass for this. And I was lucky enough to develop into a pro hockey player a little bit in that role and have success in it.
Mm-hmm. So was your dream ever to make it to the NHL, or did you just happen to say, well, I'm pretty good at this, and then eventually that was, it was established in the league that could be a role for you? Did you say, okay, I'll go with this?
My dream was to play running back for the fighting the Irish of Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish. That was my dream. Except for I didn't play football, and well, it was just growing up. I'm 45 today, but growing up, every Saturday you had college football. I mean, there wasn't even the amount of TV channels that there are today. There wasn't many sports you can watch back then. You had the Canadiens on like the Wednesdays and the Saturday nights, and you had Notre Dame football on Saturday during the day, and you had like the Giants football on Sunday. And that was kind of it for our sports world. And I just, I love that idea of the college sports, and that became my focus. I wanted to go to American University, and there were some players around me in our I grew up in the West Island, and players that Ryan Hughes, Kent Hughes, a family that went on to do amazing things, going to great schools like Middlebury and Cornell. And, I don't know why there's so many amazing schools in Canada, but we got fixated on the American route. And that's kind of was at that time. And that was my dream. My dream was to go to an American university. And, I don't know what the dream was after that, but the NHL was never in it whatsoever.
Really?
When did you start to realize that like the NHL was a possibility? Like how did teams approach you, and when they did approach you, like what did they tell you your role would be?
Well, they never really tell you your role, but I was again. I only started playing major junior at 19, so most players are drafted at 17, 18. I
Hmm.
was 19 going into major junior, and then at 20 years old, I had an opportunity to go to a training camp for the New York Rangers, and it wasn't. I had a couple of training camps to choose from. Again, I knew what I was. I was playing in a league with a lot of first round players, second round players, NHL draft picks, and I'm like they were amazing. I
Hmm.
never thought of comparing myself to them. And I see these guys can't make, the NHL teams aren't calling them up. They're still stuck in junior. I'm like, well, this is this is too far fetched for me. And in the meantime, I agreed to go to because once you play junior in Canada, major junior in Canada, you're considered a pro because you get paid like $50 a week. It's not like you're getting paid, but you can no longer go to an American university. So I'd set my sights on Canadian university. I agreed to go to a school called St. Francis Xavier out east in Nova Scotia. So that was my goal. And when one of these NHL teams came knocking and they're like, "Hey, we'd love to have you at our training camp," I'm like, "Are they talking to me? Like seriously?" Sure, but no, I'm not going to make the team or anything. But I agreed to go to school, so I go to my first ever training camp. It was the craziest thing. I'm playing with it's the New York Rangers, and our camp was we had uh, two centermen on our team. There was you make four teams, and they're all inter squad games. The first centerman was Wayne Gretzky on the team. I was the second centerman. So I was Gretz and I were double. I like to say
That's
we were
crazy.
double shifting, but that's kind of all we had. But it was just so surreal. And after a couple of weeks, training camp, they start cutting players, and they go to put me in the minors. They go to cut me. There's because there's players there that are draft picks. They have players that are in the American Hockey League, and then they have a couple of walk-ons, and I was a walk-on, and they actually go to put me in the minors for their next level of evaluating me. And the moment they went to put me in the minors, I'm like, "Hey guys, thanks a lot. I'm going back to school now. Thanks for the experience and the opportunity. It was worth missing a couple of weeks of university to go, try. It wasn't a dream, but it became a dream of, even meeting, Wayne Gretzky. I don't know if you can see his picture right up here behind me, but hanging out, or his jerseys right here beside me. You know, give it a shot. It didn't work out, but it still kind of did work out. I got, go on the ice from the NHL team and meet Wayne Gretzky. So I went back to St. FX, but before I went, they tried to sign me to a contract. And I'm like, remember that show Punked with Ashton Kutcher? I don't know if
Yeah,
you guys remember. Yeah, I felt I was being punked. Like I kept looking around for
the cameras.
yeah, is this really hap like are you guys, anyways, so I finally they sat me down. It was back then we didn't have cell phones or anything. They sat me down in a room and they're like, "We want you to sign this." And I'm like, No, I'm going to school." They're like, No, sign this. And I'm like, Mama? like how do I get out of this? You think you're 20 years old, but you're got a little experience. And I was a little bit of a physical player but once the general manager sits you down and gets all business on you and says you're not leaving until you sign this, I can't text anyone, so you have to go to a payphone, use a quarter, and call home. So, anyways, I got out of there, and they just didn't want me to go to another organization at the time. I just wasn't ready to sign because I wanted to go to the school. Went home, went to St. FX, and during that year, during Christmas, they called back again and said, "Hey, PJ, we'd be willing to sign you. We want you to come back." And then at the end of the year, it's when I made the decision that, heck, why not give it a shot? I can always come back to university, but I don't know if at 27 the same opportunity is going to be there for me that there is right now at 2021. So that was my decision. And again, I never thought I'd play a day in the NHL. I thought I might have a chance of one day making the American Hockey League. And, before you know it, a couple games into the season, I was with the New York Rangers.
How did like your friends or people back at Saint FX react to you saying turning down the contract and going back to school? Were people going, "You're crazy? Why wouldn't you sign with the New York Rangers?" Or what was the
Well,
reaction to that?
For those that know me, know that most of the time I'm full of shit. So they were like, yeah, right, PJ. They're really offering you a contract. Yeah. So, I'm always joking and pulling people's legs. And I wasn't a real good player either. And there was a lot of players that we did know that had good junior careers or might have played for Team Canada back in the day, which, believe it or not, wasn't the Olympic team. It was a travel team. Players that had amazing collegiate careers or played in Europe. I wasn't as good as almost any of them. And yet I'm the one that's getting an NHL contract. So, it was when they called around Christmas that we started to think about it. But it wasn't until the end of the school year where I really sat down with some friends. And at the time, guys, you got to think it was $1.60 on the dollar. So, the money isn't the same as today, but let's say this was my NHL contract. The offer that they gave me was $300,000 if I played in the NHL, $30,000 if I played in the American Hockey League, and $18,000 if I played in the East Coast Hockey League. In the second year, it would be $330,000 in the NHL. It would be $35,000 in the American Hockey League, and if I stayed the second year, I had a $22,500 signing bonus. So worst case scenario, I played in the East Coast the first year. I was guaranteed the American League the second year, and my signing bonus, it was $1.60 at the time. I'm thinking, worst case scenario, I walk out with $75,000. For a kid that's 21 years old back in the day, I can go to any university in Canada with $75,000 in my pocket and tried my dream. And if it didn't work, it didn't work, but I was going to go down swinging and why not? That's more than a salary of most adults made back then. So it was worth the risk. And, I would have ended up, and my friends would have been finishing university. I would have been starting. I would have been that far behind them. It would have been a 2-year gap. But the $1.60 at the time, the American dollar, and the experience was hard because I was all in on the university thing. But if I think back to it, it was really a no-brainer.
Okay.
Well, it's a no-brainer now because it worked.
Yeah.
I got jerseys behind me and my shot with Gretz. But at the time, you're risking a lot. You're risking, playing college hockey, the situation that you're in, a lot of things. You can get injured. But it was, it's when you're getting paid $1 to $1.60 and having a chance to play pro hockey, it worked out. I was lucky.
Just quickly, did you ever get any clarification on why they called you back? Because you seem to have been very surprised they even offered you anything. Did you know why they were so or not stuck on you, but why they kept calling you?
They just needed a player like that.
Okay.
In the organization like me, I guess, you draft, if we look at the Montreal Canadiens right now and to bring it back home, or the Leafs or whatever, you draft every year and you hope these players are going to make it at 17. Mm-hmm. So, then you keep them in your organization for a few years. And if they're not what you want by the time they're 20, you don't sign them. Or you sign them to an American League Hockey League contract where they start at 20 to 22, 23, and you hope they grow into what you want. But let's say the Montreal Canadiens, they haven't been able to draft a center in the last 15 years that's been able to step in for them, if you think about it. So here's a guy that I would have been back then, a fourth line center that played the role because they weren't able to draft someone in that. They were able to draft wingers, offensive centers. They were able to draft penalty killers. They weren't able to. They thought they don't have to waste a draft pick on me. They didn't really give me a contract. They were really losing too much money over. Let me tell you that. And it was a role that they thought that I could potentially fill because as their team was progressing during the year, they thought their organization, not the Rangers, but their American League team too, needed that position filled.
So when did you say, when did you eventually say, all right, I'm going to do this. It's time to, sign the contract and make it to the big leagues?
Well, make it to the big leagues. I didn't really know. I think I like the way that sounds. It was in the summer. I don't have the actual date. I was playing golf, which in a way I agreed to it. It was going back and forth and over pennies. Like when you look at the money, and it's still amazing considering my mom was a nurse and busted her hump every day. And, I walk in, and if I ever played for the New York Rangers at that time, it's 300,000. Back then, in the American Hockey League, it was 30, but 30 US, times it by 1.5. So let's call it 45, 48,000. A nurse back then that busted their hump every day was making less than that. So, I was, I don't remember the exact spot I was, but I remember my family and I being pretty crazily excited. It's so different too because, we didn't have cell phones. Like, how do you get a hold of someone? Someone comes out, tells you to go back here. You got to go back and go there. And how do you call this person? How do you get a hold of that person? And a lot of ways to pass the message and decision making, but it was a big day in the Stock household.
When you did eventually when you eventually started playing a few games in the NHL and over your career, like, what would you say was the most memorable story you have from your career? Ted was telling us there was this one story you talked about lining up next to Yager, and he told you can get like Mario Lemieux's contract or autograph.
There's a ton. Every story was a game. I mean, every game was a story. I'm looking around. I'm in my basement. I got pictures all around everywhere of some of the names that I grew up idolizing. You're watching on TV, and then you're out there playing against them. My first two centermen in New York were Wayne Gretzky and Pat LaFontaine. Not a bad two to play behind. And every night, you're playing against Yzerman, Fedorov, Mogilny, Sakic, Forsberg. It was Pavel Bure. It was crazy. But no, there's tons of stories that I could go on. They're talking about the one with. There's two stories. I'll give you two with Pittsburgh because both with Pittsburgh. One was a funny one. This one happened first, but I used to play a lot in junior and in the American Hockey League, and when I got called up to New York, I was fit into that role of the fourth line. I don't want to use the term you said enforcer before because I'm 5'10" and couldn't kick my way over a wet paper bag. So enforcer doesn't really. We're gonna go with energy player. Okay. So, anyways, we're in the American League. We're playing a bunch, and I get called up to New York, and Darren Langdon and the trainers used to always, tap me on the shoulder because I take my mouth guard out. I'd put it in my glove. I kind of undo my helmet because I wouldn't play much. You'd get 6 shifts a night, 5 shifts a night, some like 4 shifts a night. And you'd sit there like the game was a lot slower and there was more whistles and everything back then. Remember, there was a red line. So it was just way different. And so the top players can play a lot more. And whenever they called up the fourth line, sometimes Gretz would stand up, and that would mean, Stalker, your line's not going. So the guys would always tap me on the shoulder and be like, like as if the coach came by and touched me. So I quickly put my mouth guard in, put water on my arms, and I used to put water on my face and I'd go to stand up. And then I'd look over at the coach, and he wouldn't even be talking to me. So guys would be, busting my ass all the time. I caught Darren Langdon doing it a few times, game after game. So then they got the backup goalie in on it. And then they had the trainer on it. Like I'd get ready 15 times a game to get a shift, and it never happened. So one night we're playing in Pittsburgh, and Darian Kasparaitis kept going up behind Gretz and knocking Gretz's helmet forward, just being an ass, like just doing what he had to do to get Gretz off his game. But back then, if he used to play with Semenko, they used to come over and clobber you over the head. We didn't have a Semenko in New York. So, but he kept, hitting Gretz. So I remember coach yells out, Gretzky, Sundstrom, Stock. And I'm saying to myself, such bullshit. The guys now even have the coach on it. Like the guys even have the coach on it bugging me that I'm going up. So I'm not falling for this one because it's been like 3 games in a row. They've been tapping me and I haven't been moving. So I'm like, yeah, Gretzky, Sundstrom, Stock. So I just keep sitting there. sip out of the water bottle. He comes down, looks at me, and yells in my ear, Colin Campbell, Gretzky, Sundstrom, Stock, are you ready? Can you get ready? So anyways, so I quickly water on my face. I try to wake up. I've been asleep for like a period. I jump on the ice, and I'm lined up. It's Lemieux, Straka, Francis. And Lemieux, Straka, Francis. And I'm lined up beside Rod Francis, one of the nicest, best players to ever play the game. And Gretz looks over at me and says, whispers to me, no penalties. And I'm like, what? What do you, I just, like, what do you mean? That's all I'm good at, Gretz, you know? So anyways, I don't say anything. He just looks at me and whispers, I'm so nervous. Like, I can't feel my legs, can't feel my arms. And Ron Francis looks over at me, hey, kid, if you ever want to play with that guy again, I suggest you take no penalties. So I'm like, now my arms are numb, my legs are numb. This is how smart Wayne was. So Kasparaitis was playing the left point, all right? So I'm playing right wing on this line right now. Wayne Gretzky lets their centerman win the puck. So it goes defense to defense, so Kasparaitis can get the red line to dump it in. So he knows it's going to go boom, boom, and I'm going to catch him over here. So I get over there, and as Kasparaitis shoots the puck like this, I come in and I cross-check him right in the ribs. And I'm the ref, it was dirty. It was the time. But because everything that had been going on and the guy was, you have to love, if he played on your team, you loved him. But if you didn't play with him, you hated Kasparaitis. He was one of those players. So the ref let me get away with one because the guy was knocking Gretz around the entire time. But after that second, I just wanted to get off the ice. I was so nervous. But now the puck's in our zone. And Gretz doesn't play defense or come in our own zone. So I'm playing right wing center. I'm so nervous. I'm like, someone take me off. Anyways, that was my first shift with Gretz. But the story you're talking about with Lemieux, I was in the Flyers organization, and we're playing now against Pittsburgh. And we're the fourth line, and it's Peter White, another guy from Montreal, Todd Fedoruk, and myself. And we're playing against, this is hilarious, we're matching lines against Jaromir Jagr, Mario Lemieux, and Kevin Stevens. So Kevin Stevens had played with the Flyers before in New York, so I knew Kevin. And Kevin was a great man and a good friend. And what happened was Kevin's on the left, Mario's at center, and Jagr's on the right wing. So Jagr, we're in their zone, and Jagr has to catch a rim around pass on his offhand. So he's got to reach back and look like this. And while he does, my buddy Todd Fedoruk, we called him the Fridge because he was 6'1", 250 pounds, just crushes Jagr. And Kevin comes in and everyone starts fighting and starts coming in. And Kevin doesn't want to fight anyone because he's good friends, but he has to defend Jagr. And now Jagr is trying to get up, and I'm holding on to Jagr's stick. Like, this is how guys that don't fight are just kind of lost. I'm holding on to Jagr's stick as Jagr's trying to get into the melee. All he has to do is let go of his stick and he can go. But I'm like swinging him around because he won't let go of his stick. So Mario comes over nicely and grabs me by the arm and goes, hey, kid, leave him alone. If you're nice, I'll even maybe have him sign it for you after the game. And it's like one of those, it's like when the superstars come over and they talk to you like you're just a kid and should not be here. Like, I'm like, okay, Mr. Lemieux, I'm sorry. And you just kind of skate away. So yeah, there's stories every night. It was just an amazing experience that I was lucky to live.
Were there moments where you were ever like starstruck? Like in that instance, like you have Mario talking right to you, you know, like were there moments where you were in, I'm sure when you got to New York, were you starstruck that, you know, you had Wayne Gretzky right there on your team? Were there moments like that?
Every night, like my first 2 years. I mean, I'm playing against, you know, I remember battling with Ray Bourque, you know, in the corner. I remember one of the coolest moments is we're in Detroit in the old rink, which was so loud. And I'm on the ice against Fedorov, Yzerman, Shanahan, Lidstrom, and I forget there was a Russian defenseman, the fourth. I mean, and my coach is screaming at me like when the fourth line and the home team has the last change. And back then, they still kind of do it today. the fourth line was kind of the energy tough guy line. We weren't the best skaters. So when the other team had last change, they would sometimes load up almost like a power play to get out there against the crappy skaters. Anyways, one night I'm stuck out there against this, I used to play these guys in Sega. Like, this is how it's like, I got the Detroit Red Wings now. Like, I've been, and here I am on the ice against them. and it was just like, it was, lined up against Brett Hall, lined up. I remember one night I'm coming up through center ice, and Modano. I used to love Modano because his jersey used to flap. He used to fly. If you remember Mike Modano in his old Dallas days, his jersey would flap. So anyways, he's coming up at center ice, full speed at me, and I kind of go left, and I kind of put it under. I don't ever try to deke anyone out, ever. I just chip it and go. This night, for some reason, I had a brain cramp, and I went to deke him out. Anyways, it worked. And I got the puck past him, and I looked around like, did anybody else just see that? Did anybody else just see that? It was like one of those so cool moments that my whole bench was yelling at me, woo, woo. And then I get back, and the coach said, do not ever do that again. But like, I had some, I played for the Canadiens. I got a cool picture of, shaking hands with Saku. Just tons of playing at MSG. Again, I was a nobody. And moments in your career we can remember, again, being in that fourth line pugilistic role that, and playing with so many great players. It was the first time I was fighting Chris King, pictures up top at MSG. And the rink starts chanting my name. And it was just surreal. You're a first year kid, and mind you, the name PJ wasn't that hard to say, but it was just kind of, every night was kind of like I wanted to take pictures. Back then, I wish I had a camera on me, because I would have had one like in my jersey. Every time I would have went for a face-off, like, hey, Pavel Bure, just lean forward over here so I can get a snapshot that I'm on the ice with you. Hey, Peter Forsberg, Sakic, do you mind if I just Wendell Clark? There's so many amazing players. That I used to play with them with Sega. Or like, my favorite player was Chris Chelios growing up. I'm playing against Chris Chelios. It was like playing. When I played street hockey, I was Chris Chelios or Wayne Gretzky. Mm-hmm. And now you're playing with Wayne Gretzky against Chris Chelios. Wow. Like, it was pretty awesome. And I wish I could remember every team had superstars. I can go around, Felix Potvin over there, even names that were great. But you look at, Andrei Markov had an amazing career with Montreal Canadiens. And just, there's a lot of Rob Ray beat me up a whole bunch of times. There's some really cool moments that I was lucky to have.
Was there like a best building you played in? All of them must have been so different, but
yeah, they're all different. I love playing in Boston. Like, I love playing in Boston. I hated playing in the Bell Center for two reasons. A, when I played for the Montreal Canadiens, I was so nervous. Like, I don't know if I can explain to you how nervous I was, but I was just playing for the Canadiens, signing with them, with a dream come true. And then it just wasn't everything that I wished for. And part of it was I didn't deliver on how I could play. But part of it was I was so nervous. I'd look up and know, I don't know how many people in the crowd. You just know everybody. And then again, as I said before, I wasn't really that great with the hockey part of the game. So, you make mistakes, and then you come back, and obviously you just sit there and you look up and you kind of see people, your friends or family, just shaking their head. And, but that was playing for it. Playing against it, I hated it because, man, that building got rocking. Like, when that building gets going, it is deafening. Like, it is deafening. MSG, I was lucky. I played some of the best rinks. They were my home rinks. Philadelphia, the Spectrum, and their newer rink after that was just, I love the blue collar towns. I just love the blue collar towns. The fans that go to games have too much to drink, cheer on their team. It's their way out of their hard day at work, and they come in and they live and breathe through their team's success or lack of sometimes.
I've heard that like my dad last night, for example, he told me that some like Rangers fans are kind of next level. He told me a story of it was Dave Poulin. The Flyers goalie had just passed away. The 26-year-old, I forget his name now, but
Yeah.
he passed away in a car accident.
Yes.
And then one of the Rangers fans looks over to Poulin and he goes, "Hey, Poulin," like he says the kid's name, like he's dead, like stuff like that. Like, did you ever have any encounters with fans where it was kind of crossing the line?
Actually, you know what? It's not even doing justice. I can't believe I can't. Pelly Limburg.
Yes.
Yeah. Terrible story.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, fans are nuts. Like they're. You can't just say New York fans. I played for the Canadiens. Like, I live in Montreal. Montreal is one of the worst. When it was the playoffs were going on, like, and the media fuels a lot of these fans too. In all those cities, Philadelphia is nuts. Like when I was playing, I was coming in with the Boston Bruins, playing against the Canadiens. One of the French stations was saying stuff about my family, like just
really,
like it's and that's kind of, it's funny, accepted in the sports environment. Like people are nuts. The old Philly football stadium, don't know the name of it, but let's call it the Philly football stadium just so I sound smart.
Yeah.
They had a prison underneath it because that's what a game in Philly was like. I haven't really, again, I was really lucky to play in a lot of the Northeast teams, so I can only kind of tell you about their fan groups. The Bruins fans, who I'm a super proud Bruins alumni, still good friends with their organization, have a great relationship with their fan base. They're nuts. Like they're that blue collar city that love to get shit canned and get into a fight in the stands. That's kind of what it is. It's kind of it's that environment that and unfortunately a lot of fans in different cities are racist. They say a lot of mean things, and as a player on the team, you can't pick who's representing your team as a fan.
right.
Like the New York Dave Poulin is talking about the Rangers organization, that fan. The Rangers aren't proud of that, but the guy paid a ticket. He goes to the game, and these people get so wired up sometimes that they don't think. I just now it's they used to have to vent that way. Now they vent on Twitter or they vent on any media outlet, whether it's writing a blog or whatever. It was just different times. People said stuff because they can get away with it. And now there's, on the ice, I don't want to just make it sound like the fan. On the ice, guys said stuff that I couldn't believe. Guys would say stuff about family. There were some guys that just went too far. And it is what it is. You can't fix stupid.
Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit here and ask you about your opinion on some stuff happening in the NHL today. One of them is about Tim Peel and what happened with him and managing the game and all that. And I just want to know, like, if I can get, what do you think about the whole thing? What are your experiences like with the refs in the NHL? And what do you think about the situation?
First off, sorry guys, I'm drinking 9,000 glasses of water before I had to get my car this morning. I was by myself, so I had to run about 5-6 miles to pick it up. And my body is not made to run more than 2 miles. So I'm drinking about 18 gallons of water trying to keep myself going here. The Tim Peel situation is really unfortunate. It's what happens when you have humans reffing sports. I understand it. I really don't know what had happened previous in that game. But, did he call the penalty to cool the team down? Did he call the penalty to cool the ref down? Again, I'll go back to Wayne Gretzky because he's my favorite human and player of all time. So Gretz, used to, believe it or not, yell at referees. I know you're thinking, wow, Wayne Gretzky, would yell at referees. And now, the next time over an offside. Like, this is what I yell at my team and parents for when I help coach. Why are you going to yell about an offside? Have you ever seen the refs ever get together and say, that's not an offside? Keep playing. Just keep playing, everybody. No, it's just why. I remember reffing an alumni tournament final. Not alumni, sorry, a charity tournament here in Montreal, the final game. And I'm reffing the game. And I'm a better skater than everyone on the ice, and I understand the rules better. That not to sound too cocky, but I get it. Like, I know what I'm doing. And the guy's yelling at me and telling me to F off and like I'm so stupid. And I'm like, I want to go around and punch them all in the head. But, you're in this position. Now, I thought back to when I played and guys would say things to the referees. Like, every sentence to a referee starts or ends with F you. It's just it's crazy. So you take that in, and they're human. Sooner or later, I know you think people are robots, or people watch hockey players and think they're robots and no one has a heart or feelings. Well, they do. And I'm going to say Gretz, but it happens just because he's a story and the jersey's right there in the picture. But Gretz said something. You think next time Gretz steps on the ice, they're going to give Wayne Gretzky a penalty? No. The next time a third or fourth line player gets on the ice and does something a little bit off, they're getting a penalty because it's just their way of trying to fix things and even things, lower the temperature of things. It's not right. The optics of the Tim Peel thing are awful. But the NHL wants everyone mic'd up. The NHL wants everyone to get that inside taste. You just got the inside taste. And guess what? It's not always fun down there on the ice. We all know what happens. It's kind of normal. I've always been saying there's two sets of rules for two players. Tom Brady's a great example. Wayne Gretzky's a great example. The best of the best, they get the benefit of the calls sometimes. Fourth line players, third line players don't always. There's one rule book. It should always be called the same way. Yeah. But referees interpret the rule at the time and at the moment, at the speed, what their thought process is, where everything is at that moment. And that's human nature. Yeah, Tim Peel, the optics are terrible. Have I been there and seen it before? Yes. Do I understand it? I was reffing that charity game. I didn't want to give them all penalties. I wanted to punch them all out. So I get it. I do get it. But the optics are just terrible.
Do you think that a guy like McDavid will get, over the span of his career, will get treatment like Gretzky did? Where he'll kind of it'll be a little bit of like a looser leash per se?
McDavid should be suspended for the elbow he threw the other night against Kokaniemi.
That was my next question.
Yeah. They do get away. Listen, Wayne didn't really ever have to do stuff like that because he had guys that protected those type of players. There's no longer Dave Semenko's in the league for many reasons. A lot of these players now, the game has changed a little, and the whacking, it accumulates over the time, and sooner or later you snap. And McDavid snapped. But again, I go back to this one rule book. There's not one. There's actually two. There should be one because it's only written one way. But it's how the league interprets things and protects their players, and the NHLPA protects their players. And, McDavid's the biggest name in the game. Do you want him suspended? No, but does every third and fourth line player want him suspended? Every player that's been suspended want him suspended? Yeah. He just snuck up on someone and elbowed him in the face. If Tom Wilson does that, is that a suspension? But if McDavid does it, is it a suspension? Or is it a major? Or, there's a lot of what ifs there, but yeah, the league has to protect its superstars. At the same time, you have to find a way to regulate everything the same way, which is very hard to do, which I completely understand.
Okay.
I'll ask you guys a question because you guys are asking me all the damn questions. Let me ask you. Well, what's your thoughts on McDavid? What do you guys, both of you, what do you guys think of the McDavid elbow? And do you think it should be a 5, Should it be a 2? Should it not be called? Is it merited because he got slashed earlier from Kotkaniemi?
I personally think that it's a 1 game suspension at the very least. But like you said, like um there's so much stuff that goes into suspending a guy like McDavid. Like it's more than just hockey. It's business to a certain extent. I feel at least that if you take him out of a game, I feel like that's a big deal. Whereas taking a third or fourth line player out of the game is, well, like business speaking. I just think like it's not as big of a deal. Like McDavid's your star player, but if we are judging it based on like we should have like these rules apply to everyone, absolutely he should be suspended. Like you said, if some guy, if Tom Wilson does that, is a suspension? Absolutely, it's a suspension. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess that's. I think like in a perfect world, it is a suspension, but there's a lot more to take into account than just that.
So Sam, let me just change it on you then. How about like the business side of things, and fans want to see him, and there's two sides of thinking to everything. What do you think about teams resting star players? Because then you have the fans that, when you pay for a ticket, you pay for, premium game, or I think there's medium game. I don't even know if there's a bottom game, but I know there's two different variant prices depending on what team is coming to town with what players. What do you think of when, they sit Carey Price or the Capitals sit Ovechkin?
How often do they do that though? Because I haven't I don't know about that much in hockey as opposed. I know it happens in basketball, but I haven't seen that in hockey. Like the price thing is.
It
Go
happens.
on.
It happens. It will happen more towards the tail of the season, depending on where teams are positionally. That's one thing. It happened for, Ovechkin sat a couple. People argue that Carey Price should play every home game because he's the face of the organization. Then when he goes on the road, he's not playing as much. But then you got these other teams complaining that the Canadiens' best player that we're paying premium dollar for isn't playing.
Well, that's happened to me a bunch of times because I used to live in the West Island, but now I live in Toronto, and my dad and I head out to Buffalo to watch a couple of games. We've done that, and I think we've gone 3 times, and twice Carey Price hasn't played, and I'm a goalie, so like I love watching him play, and that's been that's very frustrating.
Right.
And it's not. I think it's not even that it was a back-to-back night. It's just like he didn't play that night.
Sure.
So, as a fan, and we're paying, a fair bit of money for the ticket, it's very frustrating.
Because we know if you're in Buffalo, you're not going to watch the Sabres play.
Yeah.
We all know that.
Oh,
yeah.
man.
What a mess.
Tonight,
a mess.
They could beat that streak tonight.
What a mess.
Crazy.
And they have a lot of good players.
Yeah.
Like it's not as if they have bad players. They have a former MVP of the league on their team. They have a great nucleus. Problem is they have a losing mentality and a losing core with a lot of negative energy. So, but still, 18 in a row? Are you kidding me?
18.
Like 18.
And
18.
I think they've collected a point in like 2 or 3 of those 18 games. The rest have been all regulation losses.
Yeah, it's unacceptable. And it's not so much about losing, it's the way you lose.
Yeah.
They lose ugly.
Yeah. Well, God, did you see how they lost that last game?
Yeah, Flyers. They're up 3-0 with a period to go. And the first goal kind of sums up: shot off a leg, off a post, off the back of the goalie, off his glove and in. That makes it 3-1. And then start the train. Because then, if you get 1 against Buffalo, you're getting 4. So,
I was watching something on Twitter, and I think it was like Craig Button who just came on, and he's like, not only are they losing, they're finding new ways to lose every single night. It
is. And it comes from a lot of, I think, their leadership core isn't willing to make the sacrifices to win. And You can say whatever you want, but the same thing happened in Edmonton when they gave the keys to the city to Taylor Hall, Eberle, and the third one that's still actually in Edmonton
Nugent
right
Hopkins.
now, Nugent Hopkins. You don't give this. You don't to a bunch of kids. They're kids. I was 20. You know, you're not ready to be the face of an organization. Skill set wise, you are. But when you come in after a period and everyone's looking at you to speak and say stuff, you know, they gave the seat to Crosby because he was, the future. They still had guys like Recchi, Billy Guerin, Mario Lemieux. I think Paul Coffey might have been there during that time. Put the C on him. I played with Joe Thornton, was our captain in Boston. But we had Sean O'Donnell, Don Sweeney, Brian Rolston, Rob Zaminer. We had players that have been captains everywhere else with other organizations that were around him. In Buffalo, they just took a kid who had a good collegiate career, threw him in, gave him all this money, and said, "Here, you're the man now." And I don't think he knows how to win yet. I don't think he knows how to win or make the sacrifices to bring everyone around you into that fight with you. How do you convince these guys that we got to change the way to play to get dirty wins? You need a win. Now, Jack, I know Eichel's not playing right now because he's injured. And funny enough, Taylor Hall, who I said was part of that issued team, not issue, he was the issue, part of the issued team back in the Oilers when they first started that whole thing. He's there now too. And he's got 2 goals, 3 goals on the year. Yeah. That's what I get in a year. That's what I get. I get 1. But still, accumulated over a couple of years. So
well, Sam and I were talking about in our podcast, we made a joke about the Taylor Hall curse, like who's going to acquire him next at the trade deadline. And it's just crazy to see that every single team he's gone to, they've been in contention for the number 1 overall pick. Like all those years in Edmonton, they were one of the. I don't know how many times he got the number 1 pick. 3 times.
It was almost 5 in like 8 years or something like that.
Yeah.
They had Yakupov, Taylor Hall, was Eberle, Nugent Hopkins. I forget. They had
McDavid too, obviously. I don't think that was necessarily. I think Taylor Hall may have been traded just before that.
Yeah.
And then New Jersey had the number 1 overall pick.
Jack Hughes.
Yeah, and now maybe Buffalo.
Yeah, it is pretty. And that's also a guy that won MVP of the league, if I remember correctly, when he was in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's the other thing. With the people that pick the awards, I don't think they really do due diligence either. So that's a story for another day. I won't go down that road. But anyways, what else? What else we got, guys? Who else are we going to fix the world today?
We got some notes actually about fighting because there's a lot more of it this year. Personally, I found that I've seen a lot more fights this year. There's an average of 21 fights per game so far this. Well, hold on. No, that doesn't make sense.
That's a lot. That's old school.
That's a lot of fights.
Yeah.
No, so there's been 116 fights this year over I think 546 games have been played. Last year there was only 195 fights. So the pace right now that's at, there's going to be more fights this year than last year. But fighting has gone down in previous years. So what do you make of you got into a few tussles in your day. What do you make of fighting in the game? How do people use it as a strategy? Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Sure. The easy answer as to why there's more fights, there's one division. You're playing the same team every night. And that history gets built up game after game after game. Like you play one team 3 nights in a row. Well, that hate builds. That's why I used to love growing up the old Adams division. Quebec Nordiques used to play the Canadiens and Boston Bruins. I think it was the Whalers. They'd play each other like 400 times a year. So it just, that animosity builds up. It's hard. The game has gotten away from, you play 82 games. You only play your division about 5 times a year, 6 times, and it's kind of spread out. You play, the Western Conference 3 times, and that's 2 to 3 times. You play the rest of your own conference after playing your own division a few times. You play so many teams on so many nights that it kind of gets lost. Like if I played you, Sam, and you slashed me you might get away with it, but I know I'm going to get you that next shift. Or if you slash my best player, I'm going to get you the next shift. Well, now it's you slash me once, I slash you, you slash me. The next game, it's continuous. It's going back and forth. And then the third game, okay, let's just punch each other in the face a whole bunch of times. Last year, you'd slash me one night, and then the next night, we're off to Arizona, and we're playing the Coyotes. And then you know what? I get into some kind of I'm going to get that guy. We're off to LA the next day, and you don't play those teams again till midway through the season. Now you're playing the same teams over and over and over and over again, and these games on a shortened season are heightened so much that I just wish the fans were in the buildings because there'd be double the fights this year. I think so, just because of that hate. Imagine that Leafs Habs games, like you wouldn't need much to get them going. But we talked about the fans before. Imagine the fans on steroids playing each other 10 times a year. And, it's been good hockey. There's been some good games with some physicality. But, you can't compare when it was in our era because there was, like I said, intimidation, retribution, crowd, energy, to players hitting your player. What I would try to do, I would try and hit other teams' better players to get them off their game. You always want their better players looking for, okay, where's Dum Dum on the ice instead of playing his game. So that's kind of, but then the flip side is those, the Kasparitises of the world are trying to knock Gretzky off his game. If Gretz is looking around for Kasparitis, then he's not playing to the best of his capabilities. So a player like me, my job would have been to take care of Kasparitis. So Kasparitis, instead of looking for Wayne, he's now looking for me. And if Kasparitis does it again, well, I go see the other team's best player and say, hey, Mario, if Kasparitis does one more thing to Gretz, I'm going to spear you in the eyeball. Of course, I'm not the best guy to say it because he's about 6'4" and I'm 5'10", and I never got on the ice. But you have guys on the team that would kind of – so there was intimidation. There was kind of like ways of cooling things down. And it would escalate to those moments. Today, you don't have those players in your lineup. So, let's take a hit. That hit by Kotkaniemi on McDavid. Kega gives him a little bit of a slash. McDavid comes by later and elbows him in the head. I don't care who McDavid is. Someone on the Canadiens bench should have went and bumped into him and gave him a talk.
Yeah.
And then someone on the Edmonton bench, most probably would have been Cassian, comes back and responds. And then someone on the Canadiens bench kind of responds to him. At the end of the day, Canadiens just told McDavid, you can't get away with it. Oilers just said, yo, you don't talk to my best player. And then Canadiens go, you don't talk to me that way. And then before you know it, this is how the fights used to happen. There's a couple of pieces there that are needed in play. There's too many players in the game today that don't have that mentality. I totally understand the reason why. There's so much science behind it. As a former player that played that role and the entertainment value, I love that role. I love seeing it. I'd always love to get into a fight and hurt the guy, but I never wanted to hurt the guy, if that makes sense. In a fight, in your head, you want to knock that guy out. You want to knock that guy down. You want the crowd to go crazy. But I never want to see that guy hurt. You never want to see that guy hurt on the ground. You do for that brief moment of that gladiator feeling and everyone clapping and your team coming back to victory, but you never ever want to see anybody hurt. The science now, we know that he might not be hurt now, but down the road he could be hurt. So I understand why there's less guys in the league right now that do that. But you don't need guys that just sit there and do it. I just think I like when the games get that intense that you almost feel like it's going to happen. That's what the game needs. I don't think you need the fights. You just need the guys to want to compete and to win so badly that you think that it could happen. It doesn't, for science, I don't want it to happen. For friends that have had head trauma and issues, I don't want it to happen. As a fan, I want to sit there thinking that it possibly could happen. And once in a blue moon, let it happen. And hopefully nobody gets hurt. but you both understand why it happened, what happened, and there's a positive outcome from it. Someone's going to look at me and PJ, you're a little dumb to be saying, the positive outcome for people punch themselves in the head. I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like, I understand that part, but I'm just saying from a fan of the game that grew up loving the game, when there were those guys in the game, I miss that part a little.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, there's a lot of reports, or not a lot, but there's a few reports saying Canadian NHL GMs actually wanted to try and keep the division around and let fans come back, but obviously that was turned down by the NHL.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, you were talking about it a little bit before, but like, what type of effect does a coach really have on a team? Because you were saying like the Buffalo Sabres before, like they have a core group of players that have, or might have, like this losing mentality. When a new coach comes in, whether it's with the Montreal Canadiens or with the Buffalo Sabres, like what type of effect do you think they can really have? Is it about the players or is it about the coach?
There's about 8 to 10 players per team that are your nucleus.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing, you have to win them over. Okay? No matter what, there's going to be 5 to 6 players on the team that are not going to like you. Because for many reasons, you're not playing them. They're on the fourth line. They're grumpy. They hate life, whatever. There's 5, 6 players on a team that are just neutral. Like my buddies that would come over from Sweden or Finland, and I love those human beings. They're I'm happy. Let's go have a Swedish meatball after the game, and they're just good human beings. They love the game. They love it. And then you got those core players. Like, the coach has to win over their superstar players. It's really hard to do, but you have to. So, when I was in Boston, let's say, Robbie Ftorek had to win over Joe Thornton. And there was nights where Joe did not like Robbie Ftorek. And it's important that the other players around that crew control Joe. Because if Joe becomes negative, and I'm just saying Joe Thornton, they're just giving it as an example, as any team has this, as I talk about their nucleus. But for me, I could just explain from experience. If Joe starts to drift, you already have those 5, 6 players that are hating the coach already. But you also have those 5, 6 that are just kind of in the middle. If they hop on to the negative side of things, then your dressing room has an issue. Then you have a lot of players that don't like the coach. Then you still have this nucleus that's kind of pulling against a bunch of the other players, and the coach is kind of talking to 2 different teams. And that is very common in a lot of locker rooms. I know one of the situations with John Tortorella in Columbus, players love him, or they absolutely hate him. It's kind of one of the two. It's kind of, he wants to win, but he wants you to win playing his way. And it's his way is work, and work. I want that too. But at the same time, there's ways to talk to people differently today than you talked to people 20 years ago. And not every kid coming up from Finland or Sweden or Russia is used to being berated a certain way or publicly humiliated. And therefore, you lose those players. So imagine if it's your think if they lost Panarin, who they lost in the last Bobrovsky, Panarin, they lost Line is not doing anything there right now. He was benched his first week. I'm thinking of the other kid that went to Shane. Shane's another player. These are all players in the last couple of years. They're younger kids that come up and they're raised differently by society and by their surroundings, and they're put into an environment where they're kind of pushed they're pushed, and not everyone reacts the same way. And I think that's what happens. If those superstar players start to go the wrong way, well, they bring a lot of people with them. And then you get what happens, and why do the Boston Bruins do well every year? Because their coach and their nucleus are on the same page. And their nucleus, when people don't like what the coach is saying, goes and gets those 5-6 extra players that are not sure to come on board with them. Yeah, you're always going to have the 5-6 that are mad. You always have that. But when you realize that there's 15 that are on board pulling in the same direction, even though they're grumpy or whatever, they tend to get to lean into that system and want to be part of it and want to get into the happy group. So it's the job of a coach is so important. It's not so much about coaching anymore. I think the players are very smart, and there's 19 coaches to a team anyways. It's how you manage the players is more important than how you coach them.
Do you think that Laine, a guy who's, you know, probably supposed to be in that nucleus in Columbus, because he's a superstar, do you think there's ever going to be a way that him and Torts can be on the same page, or do you think he like might get dealt again and it'll just be a tough stint for him?
I don't blame Torts on this whatsoever. I don't blame Coach Tortorella on this one. Laine looks like a big, lazy person. His release is too good. His skill set's too good. The rumors is that he's, if he can put his Xbox down and concentrate on hockey a little bit more, he wouldn't be in the situation that he's in right now. He's a guy that hasn't been getting better as his career has been going. You can't take away from his release. His release is spectacular. His reach, his size, you can't teach that. He has that. But you can teach want and will and that compete that you don't necessarily are born with, but you can at least try and hide it sometimes. Fake it, not hide it. You can try and fake it sometimes. He just flat out sometimes is like out on a walk. I'm going to get the groceries. You're being paid a bunch of money to put a little effort into this thing. And that's what frustrates a coach. You look at a player that has so much talent and you're like, just give me a little bit. If you give me half of an effort, you're going to get 30 goals in your sleep. But half. You just wait for that next bit. And he hasn't been given it. If two teams are frustrated with him for a guy with that much talent, there's a red flag somewhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. PJ, how much time do you have here? Because we could keep going if you could keep going.
Keep going for a bit longer. What do we got?
We're a little over an hour.
Yeah.
We're over now. Keep going. We'll shoot a few more questions.
Just before I guess we wrap up, we would just like to know about your media career a little bit. And
sure.
You've worked on TSN 690, you've worked on Hockey Night in Canada. Just wondering, even RDS actually. How did you get into those roles, and what made you interested in the media?
Well, I was very lucky with all of the positions. I was very lucky considering I fell into radio, and they let me burn a few times because it's I was the radio thing kind of started off with I never really listened to radio before. The only talk radio I ever listened to before was Howard Stern. I grew up listening to your father, Ted, and rock music and pop music back in the day and hits music. And I was never really a talk radio guy. When I went to New York, Howard Stern was on the radio, so we listened to him every now and then. But besides that, I never really listened to a bunch of sports radio. It just wasn't a thing I was ever into. I came back after my career was done and in a bar one night, and someone's like, "Hey, you want to come do a show?" And it went from 1, 2 to 3 to 4, and then before you know what, they offered me my own show, and I was all guns blazing, ready to go to take over the radio world. And my first few shows, it was a 3-hour show. I was done after like 8 minutes. All of my material. But instead of firing me that day and said, "Thanks, PJ, we'll see you next time," they kept me in there and they let me grind it out. And like I said, back to early on in the story about, it's all between the ears and getting confidence, like the fighting stuff and the hockey stuff and everything else in life. And confidence, I got a little better, learned how to work harder, learned to work better, learned to work smarter. And that led into some TV stuff. And then, you'll get found nowadays if you can make some noise in the right way. And the funny thing is about all these jobs is in sports, you're hired to be fired. So it's funny, like when I got let go from, a couple stations. The reasoning as to why and what is like everyone wants you to have an opinion, but as long as the opinion is the same as theirs.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of the hard things today. And so many people that run so many of these companies are so worried about what people say on Twitter. Like going back to what I said about the organizations and the fans, everyone voices are, just because this fan in the Rangers uniform says stupid stuff to a Flyers person doesn't mean the general manager of that team is encouraging this guy to say that. This guy's a fan. He has nothing to do with anything. He's allowed to say whatever he wants. I think too many people in the sports business today, they go down and look at Twitter. Oh no, what are they saying about what did PJ say? What did this say? Instead of the fact that this person's actually reacting to something that he said is good. The fact that, or there used to be this expression, which I think you throw out the window. There's no such thing as bad press. Tell that to anyone running any of these businesses today. They don't want any bad press.
Yeah.
They don't want any bad press. So, I'm doing RDS. I love the opportunity to be the Anglophone speaking on behalf of a bunch of Anglophones on RDS on French television. It's a blast following the Montreal Canadiens, who, I always play the role of against the Canadiens, but I love the city, and I love to see them do well. I just love to see them lose, because then everyone gets mad and everyone argues and they're all nuts. Everyone's nuts. Like I said about all the fans, they all get into it. So it's more fun on me, but I want them to win the Stanley Cup every year. That's kind of my mentality. Like I just, that's who I am with that part of the job. So it's a great job. You got to understand what it is, and you got to find a way to always make yourself different and find ways to make yourself always able to adapt.
So would you what kind of advice would you, is that is that a piece of advice you would give to Ryan and I, who are trying right now to, as you said, make some noise in that industry?
It's a real tough industry to get into. And it's, as I spoke to a bunch of people that are trying to get into the industry, and some that have been in the industry. And then once you're out, it's kind of, how do you get back in? You've almost got to reinvent yourself. You got to think of ways that, how many shows are out there? How many people are out there that are a certain way? Well, how do you make yourself different? Mm-hmm. How do you make yourself remembered? Yeah. That's, you got to make, you can't, it's such a tiptoe line today in the world, because there's so many things that are so PC right now that is kind of, so you got to find that line that is a little edgy, but a little stay within the lines. You want to find a way to make something entertaining. You want to find something that someone's going to remember and want to listen to you again. And it takes trial, it takes error, but it also takes someone willing to take a chance on you. And that's kind of, you're going to get kicked down, you're going to get knocked down, and you're not going to get the jobs. But you got to say to yourself that, I got to put my time and my due diligence in there to try and make myself better, try and make myself adapt. It's a tough business to get into, but it's a great business. So the risk is almost worth the reward. But in today's world, I don't care what business you're in, make sure you have a second and a third thing lined up, because the world is crazy right now. So, like, maybe sell that Johnny Manziel jersey you have behind you. I don't know if you get it. You won't get a lot.
I don't know if you'll get anything.
Yeah, well, yeah, so that's kind of, like I said, it's a great business. It's a real hard business to get in, and once you're in, you got to make the most of it. And again, how do you make the most of it? Listen to other people. Take, if there's people that you listen to, why do you listen to them? What do you like about them? What can you take from them that you can add it to yourself? Listen to somebody else. What can they, you take little pieces of all these people that you listen to and try to put them into your repertoire and build the best you that you're capable of building yourself into. It takes time, it takes experience, but like I said, if you're willing to put the work in and make the risks, well, hopefully the sacrifices equal the reward.
Fingers crossed.
Good luck, my man. Or you just start drinking a lot.
Yeah, could do that. A few bottles of rosé a night.
Yeah, I don't know about rosé, but
it's all my mom drinks, so it's all we have here.
Yeah, well, maybe not rosé, or maybe just don't. Maybe just don't ever mention that on the radio again. Just say something else. Just say something else.
Well, I'll cut that part out when I'm editing this up.
Yeah, you will. Yeah, you will. Just say whatever. Just say something that sounds hard. Just don't say, yeah, I'm gonna get crushed on some rosé tonight. I'm feeling like an animal tonight.
Well, I'll probably have 24-pack of Coors Light or something like that,
Yeah, but little better. But we're getting there. We're getting there.
Well, I really appreciate that advice, PJ. That's something Sam and I are we're trying hard to do. Hopefully, after this, we'll send you an episode that we just released today, actually, and I think you'll find some parts funny. It's unique. It's very, very different.
Awesome.
It's not I can't think of one thing out there that's like it. So
awesome.
Yeah, we're
good. Make yourself different. Get noticed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. If this doesn't work out, I got a job at Starbucks, so I could be there for life, and I'll be set.
You're good. You're good. Enjoy it, guys. Enjoy it.
PJ, we really, really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on and speak with a few sport media amateurs and youngsters. And this is the second interview in a row that I don't really know how to wrap up, so I'm going to pass the torch to Ryan here.
I did a pretty good wrap up there, so I'll repeat. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate that advice at the end. We appreciate all the stories you gave us, and
great stories.
Great stories.
Well, thanks for having me on the second episode, and hopefully when you guys get me back on, I will be the 400th and second. Hopefully it goes that well. So good luck, guys.
Fingers crossed.
Cheers, guys. Peace.